What's up, everyone? Alex here. So today I was not planning to be on camera. This is a makeshift setup. If you like this, obviously let me know. But unprecedented news today. So in case you didn't hear, the Game Awards basically announced that Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is going to be eligible for Game of the Year. Now, to be fair, I have been watching this rule change for the past several days now, ever since it got announced. Essentially, what that rule change was that it will allow DLC and expansions to be considered for Game of the Year. And so there are a lot of really interesting conversations coming out of this because, of course, you have people who are really passionate about like this rule, that it's giving a lot more opportunities to all these other games. On the other hand, what's the likelihood that a lot of the games that people release this year get snubbed because this expansion of a game that came out like, a couple of years ago is going to just knock out everybody, right? It's very controversial, and quite honestly, it's one of those things that I have a tough time really kind of sinking in. And I have a feeling that it's going to take me several days to kind of like really think about like what I feel is really the right call. Yes, a lot of people love the Elden Ring expansion, but how and why does it constitute a Game of the Year nomination? And a lot of people who I've talked to, and I've talked to my Discord, my friends, and also some people in the industry, and we all have different ideas of what this rule change means. So one of my community members basically mentioned that they weren't comfortable with the idea because some of these could be considered full games and some don't. And then you get into a philosophical conversation of like what defines a full game, especially since the Elden Ring expansion was pretty much like several hours of like content just by itself. Like, does that not count as a full game? And then, of course, a lot of people kind of approach it and said, like, well, it's technically part of that main game as well. And I think there's something to that particular argument, because really, like, in order for you to actually play through Shadow of the Erdtree, you need to actually go through the base content of Elden Ring to actually experience that part. And I think when you take that argument and you take the whole full game idea into the mix, like it's a very reasonable ask for these kinds of DLC and expansions that can be standalone, that can be considered as part of the Game of the Year conversations, right? A really good example that is like actually one of my favorite DLCs and expansions of all time is The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine. Now, compare that to the other Witcher 3 DLC. Blood and Wine was so substantial, it is literally a 40-hour RPG in and of itself. And I absolutely loved it. In fact, you could actually play Blood and Wine like straight from the title screen. Like it'll basically like get you ready for everything and then boom, you can go to Blood and Wine right away. The same thing could be said about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed last year. In fact, that's actually when a lot of people started talking about the validity of voting for an expansion content as part of the Game of the Year conversation, right? For Future Redeemed's case, what's really interesting about that is that it is a story separate from the main game of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 that you can activate on the title screen itself. And so it's not really connected technically to Xenoblade 3, but it is. In fact, it has a connection to the entire series as a whole. The reason why I'm kind of like getting into the weeds of these things is because like, what do you consider as like allowable for DLC or expansion content for Game of the Year? And I think the biggest problem really that a lot of people have is that this rule set isn't fully formed, right? Like it almost feels like they made this rule so that they can include Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree into the conversation alongside all of these other games. And if you think about it that way too and stuff, it's like, it's kind of unfair because for one thing, Elden Ring was already nominated for like Game of the Year several years ago. And here you go, almost snubbing some of the other games that released this year by including the expansion content as part of the best games of the year. Now, we don't actually know how the Game Awards is going to pan out and how the voting is going to happen. That being said, I think this is also an opportunity for me to tell you guys what I'm doing on the Backlog Battle Awards. Because you see, if you've never been to the channel before, this is the first time you've seen it, we actually do an award show every single year. It's not a big deal. It's like hundreds of people voting in our community for the best of the year for, our community and stuff. And the decision that we made last year was that we were going to basically up and the award show format and just do a basic top 10 because as gamers, we love top 10s of games. Now, what's interesting is this year, I'm actually also allowing DLC and expansions to be voted for in the award show. But I'm not doing it the same way as I am with the Game Awards by incorporating it into the same kind of category. And the way that I chose to represent it is that you have your basic ranking of 1 to 10 for the community, as do I. Like, I have my own top 10 as well. They don't interact with each other. My choices are my choices and your choices are your choices. But alongside the community choices and mine, we can actually do a vote of any expansion that we feel is deserving of a Game of the Year. In other words, it's a top 10 where the expansions kind of live just kind of like right next to it, right? Like, let's say this is like the top 10, and this is basically like where, you know, the expansions live, and they share rankings with like other games on the ranking. They don't top it, if you will. Because if you really think about it, even though expansions can be standalone, they do sit alongside the games in terms of popularity. And given that like there's really not enough to fill a top 10 for expansions, I thought this was like a really good way to represent how popular an expansion is relative to everything else that's out there, especially this year. And this is the best solution I can come up with. Obviously, I'm not the Game Awards. Jeff Keighley has an army of people that host the show, but also manage the show in the wings, and more power to him. Like, he has a lot of power to do that stuff. He has a lot of influence, and honestly, I envy him because that's a lot of clout. But for our community, for the Backlog Battle community, these expansions are going to live alongside the top 10 rankings of top 10 games of 2024. And the reason why I'm saying this right now is because literally, like in the description of this video, you're watching right now, you can vote for your favorite game of 2024. Now, there's a whole bunch of rules. I'm not going to go over them. But the point being is that there's a way to honor expansions without outright disrespecting the other games that came out this year. This is the best that I can do. But I think as the years go by, we're going to basically see a refinement of these TGA rules. And for me, I'm just really happy that Japanese game developer and publisher representation is really, really high this year at the Game Awards. But at the very least, you know how we're going to handle it in the Backlog Battle Awards. Anyways, I have ranted long enough. And again, I'm so distracted because, again, this setup is not normal. If it is, I think, hopefully you guys like it. But please let me know what you think in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Let's figure this thing out. And don't forget to vote for your favorite games of 2024 using the link in the description of this video. And I'm looking forward to seeing who wins it for you this year and the community vote. Anyways, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.